morning and welcome back. It's time for another season of the Big High School Sports Show on Bull Falls Radio, 98.9 and 1230, online at bullfallsradio.com, mobile devices and Alexa by searching WXCO, and on the Civic Media app. My name is Chad Holmes. We are back at it for another school year, the start of the 2023-2024 school year, and each Wednesday evening from 6 until 8 p.m., nothing but high school sports here on the Big High School Sports Show. We will have a new co-host for the fall sports season starting next week. I'm flying solo here tonight as my new co-host, former Wausau West High School football coach Jason Foster, has another activity, unfortunately, for tonight. But he will be back with me starting next week. He'll be with us each and every Wednesday during the high school football season. And then once we get to the winter sports season, I'll be joined again by Newman Catholic former head boys basketball coach Jeff Gress when we talk basketball and hockey during the winter months. But it should be a great time between now here in mid-August right through mid-March and the end of the winter sports season. And really looking forward to another year of the Big High School Sports Show. Coming up tonight, we got ourselves a big show here to get things underway. Got 3 different guests coming up in just a few minutes. In our second segment, we'll be joined by the head football coach of Wausau East High School, Tyler Kramer. And it's an exciting time for the Lumberjacks. After not playing varsity football each of the last 2 years, they are back. Varsity football, the numbers are good. A big challenge for Wausau East, but a lot of excitement as the Lumberjacks get set for their season opener coming up on Friday night when they travel to Lakeland. So we'll talk all about it with Tyler Kramer coming up in just a few minutes. And then at the top of the second hour, we will have our student-athlete guest for this week from Wausau West High School, one of the top seniors in the state of Wisconsin, according to WisSports.net. They ranked the top 50 returning seniors in high school football for the 2023 season, and number 29 is tight end Bryce Jaworski. Bryce Jaworski will be our student-athlete guest just after 7 o'clock. And then after that, we will be talking to the WisSports.net play-by-play announcer for their new Thursday night football series. Each and every Thursday night, WisSports.net will have a special broadcast on their YouTube channel featuring top matchups around the state of Wisconsin. And we'll talk about it with Bob Brainerd. Bob Brainerd, play-by-play man for the Thursday night football games on the WisSports.net YouTube channel. So that's all coming up. Tyler Kramer from Wausau East, head football coach. Bryce Jaworski, senior tight end from Wausau West. And WisSports.net play-by-play announcer Bob Brainerd, all coming up on this first edition of the Big High School Sports Show on Bull Falls Radio, 98.9 and 1230. And what we're going to do as well here tonight is take a look at the conferences that we keep a close eye on in 11-player football and look ahead to the Week 1 matchups. We'll talk a lot more about the 8-player seasons coming up next week because 8-player does not begin this week. In fact, Saturday, Newman Catholic will have their scrimmage, and then all the 8-player teams will begin their season coming up next week, including Newman Catholic. They'll start a week from Saturday against 3 Lakes Phelps in a game that can be heard live right here on Bull Falls Radio, 98.9 and 1230, Saturday the 26th, starting with the pregame show at 12:35. But let's jump right in. Let's start with the Valley Football Association because we will have a couple of guests from the VFA coming up. And the VFA is interesting because here in Week 1, you have games played on Thursday and on Friday. And in fact, if you're a Central Wisconsin football fan, you got Central Wisconsin teams playing games on Thursday, Friday, and even a game on Saturday featuring Pacelli down in Stevens Point. So a lot of Week 1 action on 3 different days and nights here in the kickoff of the 2023 season. But looking at the VFA, and let's talk about the matchups first on Thursday night as DC Everest will kick things off. Evergreens will travel to Green Bay Preble for the season opener. Evergreens and Green Bay Preble played each other a year ago in the season opener, and the Evergreens at Steam Stadium won by a score of 35-14. For Everest this season, they're going to be looking at their running backs. Caden Bankston and Blake Bankston, they're both back. They combined for nearly 900 yards on the ground last season and do return. But the Evergreens return limited production from the quarterback and wide receiver positions. They'll have to find replacements and production from those positions. Everest also lost their top 3 tacklers from last season, but do return their 4th and 5th leading tacklers in Dylan Neuendank and Thor Fowler. Meantime, the opponents, Green Bay Preble, they were strugglers last season. They did not win a game, and that's a bit surprising, as Green Bay Preble over the years has been a team we've seen in the playoffs a number of times. In fact, I've seen them play Wausau West a couple of times during my years covering high school football here in central Wisconsin. But Preble winless last season. They look to be in the midst of a major rebuilding project in a very good conference, the Fox River Classic Conference. So Everest at Preble Thursday night. Also on Thursday, another Valley Football Association team that's in action is the Marshfield Tigers. Marshfield travels to Hudson. Long road trip for week 1 for Marshfield. It's a terrific non-conference matchup. A team in Marshfield that's always appears to be right there in the mix in the VFA, and Hudson, a team that's always at or near the top of the Big Rivers Conference. A year ago, these teams started the season off in Marshfield, with Hudson winning that week 1 matchup 24-7. Marshfield does have a big hole to fill at quarterback with the graduation of Trevor Femmel. Femmel, big numbers a year ago. He ran for 1,090 yards, passed for 1,195 yards last season. Mason Seidel is the top returning rusher for Marshfield. He had 401 yards and 7 yards per carry last season. And also, again, a lot to replace on the defensive side as well for Marshfield. Defensively, 10 of the top 11 tacklers were seniors. Incoming junior Dawson Meissner is the lone returner of that group, as the linebacker had 59 tackles last season. Meantime, the opponent for Marshfield, Hudson, a perennial power in the Big Rivers Conference, and is expected to challenge for the title again this season. So again, that's be an interesting game Thursday with Marshfield at Hudson. Also, tomorrow night, the Wisconsin Rapids will start their season off with a tough non-conference matchup. You look at these VFA teams, most of them are on the road here in week number 1. Wisconsin Rapids Thursday night. Tomorrow night, will travel to River Falls. Wisconsin Rapids, for the first time in a while, will not rely on the talents of Leo Brostowitz. Boy, it feels like Leo Brostowitz has been around for a decade doing big things for Wisconsin Rapids. The Red Raiders will look to replace his 1,668 yards on the ground last season. He had 4,059 career yards, with the numbers just don't say it all, because Brostowitz was the guy that really carried that ground attack on his shoulders for the last couple of years. But this run-first offense does, I think, have some opportunity to continue to be solid, because Tony Biolo's team does return 4 offensive linemen. It is an option run-first offense, which is always a challenge for the opposing defenses, and Rapids will likely lean on their defense, at least early this season, because Rapids on the defensive side of the football, it looks as though very solid. They do return their leading tackler and first-team All-Valley Football Association linebacker Carter Christie, plus 5 other returning starters. But it is a tough week 1. River Falls beat Rapids 28-7 at Southwood County in week 1 last season, and went on to share the Big Rivers Conference title with Hudson. So basically, these are great matchups between teams in the VFA that were at the top of the league, winning shares of the conference championships here in week 1. Outstanding non-conference games. Last season, River Falls and Hudson tied. Last season, you had Wausau West, Wisconsin Rapids, and Marshfield all tying for the top spot in the VFA. Rapids will likely have to find a way to slow down River Falls running back Jonah Severson. Severson, boy, what a big game he had in week 1 a year ago. He had 191 yards and 3 touchdowns in the week 1 game last season. Had upwards of 1,500 yards rushing overall. So River Falls with a top running back. That will be a big test for the Rapids defense and Carter Christie tomorrow night. Also in the VFA, some teams are playing on Friday night, including the Wausau West Warriors. Wausau West has won shares of the conference championship, at least a share of the conference championship in each of the last 2 seasons. And the Warriors, coming off another really good season, 8-1 in the regular season, 9-2 overall, fell to the number 1 ranked team in the state at the time, Bayport, in the level 2 playoffs. And Wausau West will hit the road to Superior. And that's a game that I will have the call on Friday night, starting with the pregame show at 6:35 and the opening kickoff at 7 p.m. That's Wausau West at Superior Friday night, live right here on Bull Falls Radio, 98.9 and 1230. BullFallsRadio.com mobile devices and Alexa by searching WXCO and on the Civic Media app. Well, last season, it was also a matchup between the Warriors and Superior at Tom Field, and it was all Wausau West. The Warriors won that one 33-13 in Week 1 last season. Ray Reinick, at the time, he was the new starting running back for Wausau West. He was replacing Colton Garrick, the record setter that had graduated the previous year. Well, Ray Reinick started off last season big, 174 yards rushing. It was just the start for Ray Reinick. Carter Amerson had 2 catches for 80 yards for Wausau West as well in that game last year. But, boy, Wausau West looking very strong. Meantime, Superior last season struggled to a 1-8 record with an offense that was a major issue. 34 points scored in their lone win versus Eau Claire Memorial, but never scored more than 18 points in any other game, and was in single digits in 5 games last season. For Wausau West, again, I think exceptionally high expectations. As a team that has great talent back. Reinick comes off a school record 2,095 yards rushing last season, looks to back that up with another big season. The Warriors look strong defensively with junior DeAndre Gillespie anchoring a strong front with Will Mitchell, J.J. Drews, Brett Butala, Jaden Durr, among other Warrior defenders back. Saw the Warriors in their scrimmages last week, looked incredibly impressive in their scrimmages. Faced Stratford, also took on Merrill and Lakeland as well. And were dominant performances. So Wausau West looking to get off to a good start Friday night at Superior. Meantime, Wausau East is back, and we're going to talk more about the Lumberjacks coming up in just a few minutes with Tyler Kramer, the head coach. But Wausau East will open up their season at Lakeland, taking on the Thunderbirds. It will be the first 11-man varsity game for East since October the 16th of 2020. That was a 41-6 loss at Wisconsin Rapids. They played some 8-player football in 2021, played a JV schedule last season. So a lot of excitement. We'll get more details on what to expect from this Wausau East team with Coach Tyler Kramer coming up in just a few minutes. Meantime, Lakeland started last season 0-4 before roaring back to win 5 straight to end the regular season to earn a playoff spot before falling at Bedford in Level 1. They do lose their quarterback, Braden Wycheck, and 1,000-yard rusher Rocky Wagner from last season. So some holes to fill for the Lakeland Thunderbirds as they tried to continue the momentum of the second half of last season. Also on Friday night, another really tough matchup in the non-conference for a Valley Football Association squad as the Stevens Point Panthers will host Mukwonago. Stevens Point will try and bounce back from a disappointing 2-7 year a year ago. It will be the second season for Coach Ryan Eigenberger. There are reasons for optimism for Stevens Point. Turn their quarterback, Grant Chardonnay, who completed 60% of his passes for more than 1,700 yards and 11 touchdowns a year ago. He will also have help in the running game with Braylon Smola, who rushed for 744 yards and 8 touchdowns, plus a good target in wide receiver Eamon Konopaki. He was Spash's second leading receiver at 47 catches for 550 yards and 5 TDs last year. Defensively, Spash will need massive improvement. They had a rough go of it on the defensive side a year ago. They gave up more than 33 points per game. Riley Manternock is the top returning tackler with 65 stops last season for the Panthers. And it will be a massive Week 1 test versus Mukwonago at Gerke on Friday. Mukwonago reached the Division I state title game last season, fell to Kimberly 34-30. The Classic 8 Conference Power will need to replace most of their offensive skill position players, but do return a strong offensive line. So that's Mukwonago at Stevens Point on Friday night. The other schools from the VFA that are in action are the teams from the Fox Valley. Appleton West will be at Manitowoc Lincoln. Appleton West will look to build on a positive finish to last season. They upset Stevens Point 14-7 in Week 9. The Terrors do return quarterback Ryder Hoffman, but still have a lot of work to do to rise in the FVA. And a team that could be a factor. A team that's a bit of an enigma, Hortonville. Hortonville will be hosting West De Pere on Friday. Hortonville was a team that underachieved in the win-loss department last season with just a 2-7 record, including a forfeit win versus East, but could be poised for a big improvement this season. They are led by a new coach, Nick Reichert. The Polar Bears return quite a bit. They return their quarterback in Broden Bunsen, their leading rusher, Gavin Vollner, first team all Valley Football Association lineman Noah Drager, all back. And we'll find out a lot about Hortonville this week. That is a tough non-conference. Again, these VFA teams are facing some really good non-conference competition. Hortonville against West De Pere. West De Pere is a Fox River Conference North powerhouse. They were the Division II state runners-up a year ago and consistently battles Bayport atop their league. So, again, that's a look at what to expect this week with the Valley Football Association. We'll talk about the other conferences and the Week 1 matchups a little bit later on. But coming up next, we'll have our first guest, our first coach guest for the season. We'll be talking to the head man of the Wausau East Lumberjacks, Tyler Kramer. That's coming up next. It is the Big High School Sports Show on Bull Falls Radio, 98.9 and 1230, online at bullfallsradio.com, mobile devices and Alexa by searching WXCO, and on the Civic Media app. And welcome back. It is the debut edition for the 2023-2024 school year of the Big High School Sports Show on Bull Falls Radio, 98.9 and 1230, online at bullfallsradio.com, mobile devices, and Alexa by searching WXCO. I'm Chad Holmes, and our first guest, number one for the entire season, the head football coach of the Wausau East Lumberjacks, Tyler Kramer. First of all, Coach, thanks for coming on over tonight.
No problem.
Well, the first thing I said to you when you came in was, it's got to be such an exciting week. Obviously, you, everyone on staff, the kids who have been going through so much the last couple of years to be a varsity game week. What is the feeling around the team this week?
Just pure excitement. I mean, it always feels like the summer is so long, going through contact days and different camps that we're going through, and you finally get to that first week, you're like, holy cow, we're here. We actually get to play against somebody in a different colored jersey.
There's so much to talk about. Let's kind of take a step back, big picture-wise, for yourself. Last year, was it last year your first year on staff, on the coaching staff?
No,
at
so
Wausau East?
I've been an assistant since 2018.
Okay.
So I started out as a freshman assistant, came in as a volunteer when Coach Grundy was still the head coach there, moved up to a freshman staff position, and then went to varsity the year after that.
You are a Wausau East Lumberjack, correct?
Yes, I am.
You went to school at Wausau East.
Graduated in 2017.
What does that mean for you to be the head man trying to bring back Wausau East football, because it has been a struggle? And one of the things that, from the outside, the lack of stability within the coaches has been probably a big factor, because as you probably well know, developing the relationships is such a vital part of having a good program. For yourself to have the red blood of Wausau East to be able to provide some stability the last couple of years, how important has that been in terms of getting to the point we are, where you're back playing varsity football this year? So
it's been huge, and one thing I've talked about with a lot of people, we've had 7 head coaches in 12 years. It's not a recipe for success.
Right.
I've been a part as a player and as a coach of a bunch of them, and I think just that consistency piece of the kids know no matter what, I'm going to be there tomorrow. I don't have any interest at the moment of going anywhere else. I'm Wausau East through and through, and I knew that when I came back and wanting to coach, that Wausau East is the place I wanted to be.
To get to this point as well, normally during the course, of getting to the first week of a new season, it's, starts at the end of the previous season and then the off season. Since you guys had a JV season a year ago, this has been maybe a multi-year project to get to this point, to be back. What has been the most important aspects in terms of this building project for you and the coaches and the entire Wausau East community when you decide, okay, this is the kind of the roadmap to get ready to go here in August of 2023 to be back in varsity football? What was the big keys to getting to this point?
The huge thing is just getting kids to understand that varsity is different. Whether it's the speed, the intensity, how many eyes are on you every game, getting kids to know that we have to take practice just a little bit more serious. We have to make sure that we're there. We got to go to stuff in the off season. Getting that back in after we had our COVID year and then 8-man and then JV, it's like we haven't had a true varsity season in a long time. So these seniors have never experienced that. So getting them to know that for the first time, even with last year at the beginning, we told them our eyes are on next year. We want you guys to have as much fun as you can with this year and really develop. But we only had one senior on the team to start the season last year, so it's nice to have 21 out of 22 returning starters.
Tyler Kramer, head football coach of Wausau East, joining us here on the Big High School Sports Show. The kids that have gone through this, and I just think that you can't give enough credit to the kids that have gone through this process to, as you said, having the COVID year, having an 8-man year, having a JV year, to stay with it. When it's not easy when you're going through a lot of adversity to stick with it when you don't have maybe that carrot at the end of a week on a Friday night where you have a chance to win a varsity football game. I imagine the credit really has to go to the young men who have gone through the fire to get to this point.
100%. These seniors, and we've kept a good majority since their freshman year, are just the most resilient group of kids I've ever worked with. And even playing with them, I can't even imagine. When I played, we had 2 0-9 seasons in a row, and there's not a single kid here that would have shied away from that. Just pushing through the fire, knowing that we want to come back and be competitive on varsity and finally bring Wausau East back, even with all the turmoil that we've gone through with different coaches and all the different seasons that we had, that they're going to keep pushing.
I like to ask coaches, especially, when they're still early on in their tenure, about the building blocks, the foundational pieces that being through as a player, as an assistant coach. What are the basic building blocks that you try to set up here for this program in order to have as much success as possible?
So I think consistency, making sure that we have a good coaching staff that really understands, like, we all have to be on the same page at all times. Kids have to really understand that we're working at the same time, because kids catch on to that stuff before anybody else does. And then just having fun with it. Especially with high school sports, if you're not having fun, I don't believe there's a point to it.
Right.
So that fun for me has been, especially last year, is just the base. If we establish that football can be fun at Wausau East, we can have some success at the end of the day.
And I imagine that is such an important aspect of having kids come out. I mean, again, so many problems with the programs we've seen around the state of Wisconsin are numbers. Yeah. There's different reasons for it, but obviously it's been over the last number of years. It even started before COVID. There was a sense that around the state that some places were having trouble getting kids out. Having that fun aspect to get the numbers up. Where do you stand in terms of numbers? What has been the process of numbers involved in Wausau East football maybe over the last handful of years?
So we had last year having only one senior. I think we started the season with, I want to say 40-something for sophomore through senior. And that was mostly our sophomore class.
Right.
Which at the end of every year, there's going to be a couple kids that drop off of each class. That's just how it happens. Now we're at the point we can run all 3 teams, which was our first goal. When I was talking to administration and everything, we're a school that's big enough that needs to be running a varsity JV and JV2, so those kids can develop at that speed. I think at our freshman level, we're having higher numbers than we've had in a long time. Sophomores and junior, we're still keeping out, and then the senior class is staying strong.
Let's talk about the team itself. Let's get between the lines. And obviously, I'm sure you get asked a lot about the whole process, but the exciting part is being between the lines.
100%.
Since practice started a few weeks ago, and obviously there's off season as well, but since practice started this, in the last few weeks, what has jumped out in terms of what you see as these football players? What are the keys as football players that you're seeing from your guys?
Speed. We're a fast team at the end of the day, and it's tough in high school because you can't always get the size that you want. And we have big kids at certain positions. We have almost the whole. I have Dan Garrett on my staff, the head basketball coach, and we have almost the whole basketball team out for football, which is just an awesome connection.
Nice.
And some of those boys are big,
right?
Like a Charlie Cayley. I mean, I wish I was 6'6" when I was playing. I could tell you that, but. Just the speed we have on this team with Caden Worth and Ralph Pegas, who are both like 4 or 5 guys, that's going to match up well against a lot of teams that we're playing against. And we're just lightning fast around the field. I love seeing that.
Offensively, what's the style? What kind of offense are you running?
Like an inside zone spread. Pretty, I would say like a college style, like you'd see at some of the higher level college teams, like the SEC schools. We'd love. I think being an O-line guy myself, I would love to pound the ball all day if we could just sit in I formation and chunk 4 yards on you. But you play your style to your kids, and spread inside zone is where we have succeeded. And these kids, even with the last staff, I got mentored by our offensive coordinator that we had for a long time, and I love this offense. I think it's a fun offense for the kids because we can sling the ball around a little bit and just be fast on the field.
When you talk about slinging the ball around, that means quarterback. Who's your quarterback, and what does he bring to the table?
Pacey Weber. For me, if Pacey Weber wasn't on our team, we wouldn't have the success that we could have. He's a kid that the composure is crazy. I haven't met a kid that's so locked in at all times. It was funny, I was just talking about, I put out installs on Sunday for our new plays that we were looking at putting in this week. And before I had even texted the kids that it was out, Pacey looked at it the moment I had it out. And that's just how he is. Sure. Anything you ask him to do, he just does it. His poise is amazing. He's that first kid to lead everybody. And when we chose our captains this year, he was the first one we just had written in.
Obviously, leadership in this situation does mean a whole lot, and to have, especially your quarterback, step up like that has to be vital. But the thing about a quarterback is you can be doing everything right, but you need some help. Who are the skill guys that are going to help out Pacey in terms of helping him and helping your team move the football?
So when I look at, our running back is Ralph Pegas, and to me, when I look at him at the JV level last year, he averaged 13 yards a carry.
That's pretty good.
So he just lightning fast, but he loves contact. And usually you get one or the other, but he's not afraid of either. Fun kid to be around too. At the receivers, we can go to Brady Prohoda, who's a great basketball player for us, super athletic. Jesse Nabgetzik is another kid, awesome basketball player. And having that size on the outside where Brady's 6'3", Jesse's 6'4", and they're both pretty fast kids helps. Caden Worth is another one, fastest kid on the team. I think his fastest clocked 40 was a 4.47, and to see that at the high school level is just great. Fun kid to be around. And then a new kid we got out that I think will start for us this year, Isaac Rozwadowski. Another kid, so coachable, fun to be around, and is just a sponge.
Absolutely. That's terrific. And the multi-sport athletes are so important for success, no matter where you can be a D1 school, you can be a D7 school.
Huge.
Having the multi-sport athletes is really important. It sounds as though you got that going right now at East.
Yep. We have multiple coaches on my staff and other staffs that I've worked with that coach multiple sports. So I coach wrestling in the winter. I have Dan Garrett on my staff, who's the head basketball coach. Sean Wilson, who also coaches basketball. And we have other guys that coach two sports as well, different assistants, and even my freshman coaches. A lot of them coach multiple sports. So getting that connection where I can help out the wrestling team with football, and wrestling can help me out, and basketball can do this for us, and really me being able to go to the basketball games and see these are my kids I'm working with. Sure. I get to enjoy a basketball game at the same time is huge for us.
Again, we're with Tyler Kramer, the head football coach of Wausau East High School, here on the Big High School Sports Show on Bull Falls Radio, 98.9 and 1230. Defensively, what is the mindset on the defensive side of the football? What kind of style do you want to play, and who are some of the kids that we can expect to see putting up some tackles and maybe forcing some turnovers for East?
Aggressive. We're an aggressive defense. We're pretty young on defense, but those senior leaders that we have, again, a kid like Caden Worth, super fast around the field. Jack Barthels, he's like a 6'1", 6'2" corner for us, and I laugh with him because Jack doesn't get a lot of balls thrown to him. Even in practice, in our scrimmage last week, I told him, like, well, I think you could have just sat out because nobody was throwing your way anyways. But he's a fun kid to have around. Our linebackers, we have a couple young guys with Bodie Beversdorf, who just fly. When you look at him, he doesn't scream, I'm a huge aggressive football player, but he just makes hits, and I love seeing it. Elmer Hurd's another guy for us, plays outside linebacker or D-line, and then he also plays O-line, and his development in the past year, he went from kind of a pudgy kid, and he's going to laugh hearing me say that, went from kind of a pudgy kid, and I looked at him first day this year, I was like, wow, you look like a football player now. Just a huge amount of development, but those will be some of our key guys.
How much do you have, or how much are you going to have in terms of two-way players, having playing offensive defense? Because I know that that can be a positive in a sense, having talented kids out there. But if somebody does get nicked up in some way, that's basically two injuries at the same time. How much will you be doing in terms of two ways?
A few, just kids that can handle it. And we want to stay mindful of that because I don't want to ruin them for the next sport. Football is not the most important thing at the end of the day. I want them to still enjoy what they're doing and not be absolutely exhausted at all times. If I were to guess, just thinking about it now, I would think 2 or 3 kids at the moment that I could see starting both ways. But I'm confident enough in our backups that if these guys need a breather, that they can get in for them too.
This week, heading up to Lakeland, play on the turf up at at Lakeland. Your first 2 games, non-conference, both on the road against GNC schools, which is obviously great because that's where East has wanted to be for a long time. But at the same time, Lakeland obviously played exceptionally well coming down the stretch last year, winning 5 in a row to earn a playoff spot. In terms of preparing for this week's game, anything about Lakeland that you know? Because obviously week 1 is a little bit different than maybe any other week of the season where you have game film you can look at. But what do you expect from Lakeland this week?
I mean, they're a well-coached team. I got to meet with their head coach a little bit at a Rhinelander camp in March. There's some good kids flying around. I'm just excited to see how our kids prepare for their first game.
Sure.
But I expect them to be a super formidable opponent. Like you said, we've wanted to be in the GNC since before I was in high school.
Right.
And I think those are the teams that will match up. We match up with them exceptionally well. Obviously, I think we'll give them a challenge. But it'll be a fun game.
And these first 2 games, I mean, every time we talk about at the start of a new season, you say, well, they got X number of kids back on offense, on defense. For Wausau East, yes, you have kids who have played football, JV football last season, but this is varsity football, as you said. These first 2 games, I imagine, are very significant, and just in terms of the experience and learning the speed and playing on a Friday night at 7 o'clock. I imagine that just making sure your guys are not too excited coming up on Friday night. So many different things you got to kind of keep an eye on, isn't there?
Yeah, I guess just giving them the challenge of making sure the intensity is high, but almost when it gets too high, I don't want them to get so reeled into it that they're thinking too much about the game. Because like I said before, fun is the base of it. And if you're too much in your own head about winning these 2 non-conference games, there's not a chance that we'll win.
Right. Looking at expectations, I think it's fair to say the expectations outside your program are low. When you look at the previews and all that.
Yep.
And when I see some quotes from your kids, they seem to put their arms around it. They like the aspect of trying to prove people wrong. Is that what you get within the locker room when you're around your kids?
100%. And I told these kids just yesterday when we had a preview come out that put us at 8th in the conference, and they didn't have to say too much about us. I told them, I said, at the end of the day, you guys got to know. Nobody knows anything about us. With us playing JV last year, and nobody really had to talk to us or about us with anything. I said, the people that believe in you are here right now. And everybody just got silent for a moment. But really reeling that in, and it's helped instill a real family culture where these kids will do anything for each other, and they know that the coaches will do that for them too.
One thing off the beaten path is the fact that you're playing on the road early in the season. How do you look at that? I mean, it's a kind of a shame in a sense because I know Tom Field's such a historic place, and I know that I'm sure everybody involved with your program wants to get back out there at Tom Field. How do you look at this early season where you're on the road quite a bit?
I love the challenge right away. And I want the kids to get conditioned to a more hostile environment. I love Tom Field, playing there, and I tell kids just with the JV games I got out there, it's like I almost get chills when I touch the grass there because you relive all these good memories, and it's so historic walking through the locker room and seeing the pictures of the guys that played in the NFL.
Right.
But on the road, especially with different field conditions and places like Lakeland and Rhinelander that we haven't played much in the past, it'll be very different for us, but I love the challenge right away.
And I got to ask you, the law game is back this year, which is, I think, just fantastic for the entire community. I missed it last year. I missed it because I had to go 3 hours instead of 3 minutes to get to the game. But it's such a great environment, and I know that everybody involved in East and West love it, the fact it's coming back. I imagine for those guys who missed the law game the last couple of years, that's also something that's going to be so very special to have back.
Oh, yeah. And the kids talk about it all the time. And with next year, us going to the GNC next year before the merger, we won't have a law game next year, so this was potentially the last one we ever have.
Right.
And being a part of that and not having one in the past couple of years, I have to tell the kids to stop talking about it at points, which is a fun spot to be in. But with where the programs are at, we have good relations with each other. Even the kids do. It's fun seeing them interact with the West kids at the different camps that we go to at the same time. but we're ready.
I wasn't going to really talk about the merger because it's sort of out there. I mean, you have so many things that you're trying to do right now at East. Is it sometimes difficult for the program knowing that it's all coming together in 2 years? Because you're seeing a lot of freshmen. The world's going to look a little different for all these kids coming in the future. How do you take that whole issue? Do you just sort of put it on the side right now and say, hey, this is what we're going to focus on here this year, one day at a time? Does it hang out there? Does it make it more difficult getting kids out? Is there anything that you've learned about this issue that's kind of been out there for a while now, and now the sense that we got 2 more years before there is a merger?
So the way I run into it, and I've had some kids question it when coming out or not wanting to come back out because they don't know how it's all going to end up. The way I word it to these kids is exactly how you said. I take it a day at a time. And I laugh about it in the way I tell these kids, if I thought 2 years ahead, I'd be the most successful man in Wisconsin.
Right.
That's just not how I am.
Right.
I want to succeed in what we're doing now and plan for next year as we go on, and whatever happens with that, I'm extremely excited to be able to work with some of those West head coaches because the experience that the West coaches in general, they have awesome experience, and we can just learn from each other.
And one final question. As we sit here, almost the eve of week number 1, what would constitute a successful season for Wausau East football?
Being competitive. I think after the trials that we've had, and I tell kids a lot of it started when I was in high school, having 2 0-9 seasons in a row, and then Coach Grundy came back and brought a little bit of life into the program. We started 3-0 one season, then ended up being 3-6. That's a tough thing to go through, and having COVID and 8-man and JV. If we can go out there and just show that Wausau East is here to play, I'll be happy at the end of the day.
Fantastic. Tyler Kramer, head football coach of Wausau East. Good luck on Friday. Good luck throughout the season.
I appreciate it.
We got to take a break. We're going to come back. Coming up, we'll have more on week number 1. We still will be talking to our student-athlete guest for this week from Wausau West High School, tight end Bryce Jaworski, and also Bob Brainerd from WisSports.net will be a guest later on in the program as well. I'm Chad Holmes. It is the Big High School Sports Show on Bull Falls Radio, 98.9 and 1230. And welcome back. Big High School Sports Show on Bull Falls Radio, 98.9 and 1230. Online at bullfallsradio.com. Mobile devices and Alexa by searching WXCO and on the Civic Media app. Thanks again to Tyler Kramer, the Wausau East Lumberjack head football coach, for joining us here tonight. Lumberjacks at Lakeland on Friday. Coming up at the top of the second hour, we'll be joined by our student-athlete guest for this week, Wausau West tight end, senior Bryce Jaworski. So Bryce Jaworski just after the top of the hour. And then following that, we'll be talking from WisSports.net, Bob Brainerd. He is the play-by-play voice of a new series of broadcasts brought to you by WisSports.net on their YouTube channel each Thursday night. So we'll talk about that and high school football generally with Bob Brainerd later in the second hour as well. Let's continue to look ahead, both at the conferences we cover on a regular basis on this program and also in terms of the matchups for this week. And again, a quick note that tonight, flying solo, but starting next week, I'll be joined during the fall and football season by former Wausau West football coach Jason Foster. So Coach Foster will be joining me on this program starting next week, 6 to 8 p.m. on Wednesday here on the Big High School Sports Show. Great Northern Conference and the Mosinee Indians look to be, at least from the outside looking in, as a significant favorite in the GNC for 2023. And Mosinee will begin their campaign with an outstanding non-conference game, taking on the defending Division VI state champions, the Stratford Tigers. Stratford at Mosinee on Friday night. A year ago, when these teams played, we saw a rare 20-20 tie. Because weather moved in late in the second half and they were not able to continue. So a 20-20 tie between Stratford and Mosinee last year. Mosinee appears set for a push not only in the regular season in the GNC, but perhaps even a deeper postseason run with a lot of experience back and talent as well. Quarterback Gavin Obremski returns after throwing for more than 2,500 yards and an incredible 34 touchdowns last season. His top target will be senior wide receiver Keegan Jershele. Jershele caught 47 balls for 823 yards and 11 touchdowns a year ago. Mosinee will need to replace the big production of Davin Stoffel on both sides of the ball. He was an outstanding performer for multiple years, but he has graduated, moved on to college football. Mosinee does have 8 returning starters, however, on defense, according to a preview posted on wisports.net. So, again, a lot of returning talent on defense and offense for Mosinee. Meantime, Stratford, Central Wisconsin Conference large division team, added yet another gold trophy to their case last season with the Division 6 state title as well. As running back Kohler Kilty was an amazing workhorse for the Tigers last season. He ran the ball 301 times for 1,877 yards and scored 21 touchdowns, including a 192-yard rushing performance in the state title game. So look for another very athletic Stratford team that will test all opponents on the edges again this season. The team that's been up there with Mosinee for the most part in the Great Northern Conference in recent seasons, the Medford Raiders. Medford, they will host New Richmond coming up on Friday in their Week 1 matchup. There are a lot of questions to be answered for Medford this season. Just 3 starters returned from last season's team that was dominated by outstanding seniors. It is another rematch of a Week 1 game of 2022. New Richmond knocked off Medford by a score of 32-8. New Richmond, yet another Big River school. We talked about some of those really good Big Rivers team earlier in the show, like Hudson, a team that's always one of the top teams in terms of the Big Rivers. We also talked about River Falls, another one of those outstanding squads. And you got New Richmond. New Richmond made the playoffs a year ago, had a 7-4 record. Also, they'll be replacing a good group of seniors, but they do have 3 returning offensive line starters. So, again, it'll be a big challenge for Medford in their Week 1 game. You got the Merrill Blue Jays. Merrill will be home on Friday night taking on Osceola. And the Blue Jays ended a 5-year playoff drought a year ago. There are some questions early on this season on the offensive side of the ball for Merrill. 8 of their 11 starters graduated. There are 5 returning starters on the defensive side. Incoming senior Brody Lang had 6 sacks last season for Merrill. Eric Mann returns after recording 50 tackles. Meantime, Osceola, a member of the Middle Border Conference, was 3-6 last season, but does have some experience back with 6 starters returning on both sides of the ball. So Osceola traveling to Jay Stadium to take on the Merrill Blue Jays on Friday night. The Antigo Red Robins, they're going to try to do what Merrill did last season, end a 5-year playoff drought. And Antigo, I think some optimism, but boy, a very tough Week 1 game. The Red Robins at Wittenberg-Burnhamwood. And Antigo, again, a very tough way to start, but they do look like they have started the rebuild. They've been in a rebuilding phase. They've had some numbers issues in recent years, but coming off a 2-7 season a year ago, they do have 14 overall starters returning to lay the foundation for this season. Antigo does have 2 quarterbacks who played significant time a year ago back, Jake Verhalselt and Colton Tomei. And leading rusher Alec Napcavage. Napcavage gained 524 yards on the ground a year ago for the Red Robins. Leading tackler Alex Schlieve, who made 79 stops a year ago, is also back. Meantime, Wittenberg-Burnhamwood. Boy, this is a program that has really turned it up a few notches in recent years. The Chargers were officially co-champions of the CWC Large last season because of a retroactive forfeit from Amherst. The season did end in disappointing fashion with a Level 1 playoff loss at home to Kiel. That said, despite losing top rusher David Gauderman to graduation, a whole lot of talent and experience is back for Coach Jason Rick, led by quarterback Nathan Wapikane. According to wisports.net, 9 starters return on offense and 8 on defense for Wittenberg-Burnhamwood. You got a program that looked to be on the upswing that came back hard to earth a year ago, the Rhinelander Hodags. Rhinelander, also a GNC squad, will be at Tomahawk coming up on Friday night for a non-conference matchup. Rhinelander had a pretty good run for a couple of years. Playoff appearances before 2022. But the Hodags took a step back last season with only one win and an offense that averaged just 7 points per game. The defense also struggled, giving up a lot of points in every game other than their lone win, 14-0 over Hayward. Quarterback James Heck threw for nearly 700 yards last season and returns under center for the Hodags. Leading rusher Peyton Campbell also returns. Tomahawk did beat Rhinelander 27-13 in the opener last season. After a fast start, the Hatchets faded to a 3-6 finish a year ago and will have a new coach this season in Dewey Riley. Also in the GNC, mentioned Lakeland, of course, when we talked about the VFA earlier, Lakeland hosting Wausau East, and then a couple of schools that are finishing up their tour of duty in the Great Northern Conference this season with the realignment of football conferences coming in 2024. Final seasons in the Great Northern for Hayward. Hayward will be taking on Cumberland on Friday night, and Ashland home against Northwestern. Both Hayward and Ashland have been struggling in the league recently and have an uphill struggle to try to work their way into position for a playoff berth here in 2023. Merrillwood Conference, it's going to be the end of an era because in football, there will not be a Merrillwood Conference in 2024 after the realignment. But this season, again, a small conference. Again, this season, there is a crossover aspect where Merrillwood Conference schools will take on Central Wisconsin Conference small division schools in 2 games that will count in both conference standings. So that could be, I think, when you look at it, an advantage for the Merrillwood Conference with those 2 games against CWC small foes that you could hopefully add a couple of W's and move yourself closer to the level needed to get to the postseason. But that, I think, is a really tough match for those CWC small schools. I'm going to talk about this a little bit later on when I talk about the CWC small, but boy, it makes it much more difficult for those schools having to face 2 Merrillwood Conference teams in games that count in the conference to get to the postseason playoffs. But concerning the Merrillwood, you got the Pittsville Panthers. They will open things up tomorrow, Thursday, taking on Augusta on the road. Pittsville had an interesting 2022 with just 1 win in their first 7 games, but closed the regular season with wins over Marathon and Abbotsford to find their way into the playoffs, where they played competitively for a half at Assumption before falling 34-18. There is a reason for optimism for the Panthers, with 6 starters returning on both sides of the ball. Friday night, got some action from Merrillwood Conference non-conference teams. Marathon has a very, 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 very long road trip at Kenosha Christian Life. Marathon was initially supposed to face Rib Lake Prentice in the opener, but Rib Lake Prentice canceled their varsity season because of numbers. Marathon then picked up Kenosha Christian Life as a substitute. Marathon finished 3-6 overall last season and saw a potential playoff spot slip away with 4 straight losses to end the regular season. Marathon does have experience under center as quarterback Cooper Huxtamo returns after throwing for nearly 1,400 yards last season with 11 touchdowns. It is a mixed bag experience-wise for the Raiders, with 5 starters returning on each side of the ball. Again, it will be a long trip for Marathon when they do go to the southern border of Wisconsin to face Kenosha Christian Life. It does look like a matchup that favors Marathon. Kenosha Christian Life has very little experience back from a one-win team last season and a new head coach. According to head coach Bob Johnson in a WisSports.net preview, they will try to keep it simple on offense and disguise the defense, but the team is young and the numbers are small. Edgar opens up their season taking on Ellsworth on Friday night. Edgar was one of 3 co-champs of the Merrillwood last season and ultimately finished at 10-2. Many of the players who led the success will be back in 2023 as the Wildcats look to add to their impressive trophy case. Carter Butt does it on both sides of the football for Edgar with 123 tackles last season and also rushed for more than 1,300 yards as well. He will be target number 1 for any opponent of Edgar this season. Before getting to the Merrillwood Conference games, Edgar again will be testing themselves with a pair of tough non-conference matchups. Next week, they'll face longtime rival Stratford, and this week opens with that tough Ellsworth squad. Ellsworth was also 10-2 last season and was the champions of the Middle Border Conference. Edgar will face an experienced quarterback Friday as Ellsworth returns signal caller Griffin Blomberg. Colby was also one of the 3 tri-champions of the Merrillwood in 2022, where their hopes of a solo title ended in week number 9 with a loss to Auburndale. Colby has been one of the consistently best teams in the state in recent years, including their Division VI state title just 2 years ago. But there will be a lot of unknowns going into the season. There are just 2 starters returning on both sides of the football for the Hornets. However, in comments made to WisSports.net, Coach Jim Hagan sounds confident the talent level will be there with the new starters. The Colby season opener sounds like it could be a very intriguing one. They travel to Neillsville-Granton. Neillsville-Granton coach Reed Lehman, who is a Edgar grad, sounds bullish on his team in the WisSports.net preview. 7 starters back on each side of the ball from a 3-6 team a year ago, plus experience at the quarterback position, could put Neillsville-Granton in a position to take advantage of the relative inexperience of Colby in week number 1. Auburndale. They will host Dominican in their first week matchup. Auburndale has been a great story in recent years, going from a program that played some 8-player football with low numbers just a few years ago to a shared Merriwood title a season ago. The Eagles earned that title with a huge Week 9 win over then unbeaten Colby. Numbers continue to rise within the program, but there are a number of starters that do need to be replaced from last year's squad. 3 starters are back on each side for Auburndale. The Eagles do return running back Evan Scholl, who rushed for 721 yards last season. As for Week 1, Dominican is a struggling program. They're returning to varsity football this season after playing only JV last year. And Loyal is at Abbotsford. And for about half the season in 2022, it looked like the string of playoff appearances for the Abbotsford Falcons would continue. Abby started their season with 4 straight wins before the worm turned with 5 straight losses to complete the season and leave the Falcons outside the playoffs. There have been few teams in the area that have run the ball as effectively as Abbotsford in recent seasons, and that will have to continue in 2023 for them to return to the playoffs. Christian Fuentes ran for 971 yards last season and returns, as does J.V. Castillo, the QB who ran for 583 yards and threw for 385 more. Meantime, Loyal, they've been a perennial playoff team as well until last year. The Greyhounds saw their streak of 10 straight seasons playing in the postseason end with a 2-7 record. Offense was a struggle last season, but they do return their top rusher, Louis Nicolai. We need to take another break, but coming up in the second hour of the show, we'll continue previewing week number 1 for the CWC Large and the And welcome back. It is hour number 2 of the Big High School Sports Show on Bull Falls Radio, 98.9 and 1230. Online at bullfallsradio.com, mobile devices, and Alexa by searching WXCO. Well, our student-athlete guest for this week from Wausau West High School, senior tight end Bryce Jaworski. Bryce, thank you for popping on over.
No problem.
Well, number 1, I was just saying to you off the air, saw your team play in your scrimmage over at DC Everest last Friday, and one of the plays early on, you grabbed a ball, broke a couple tackles, went into the end zone. I thought, mid-season form. Generally, I mean, that kind of play, that gets your blood going here. You know, nice way to get going with the scrimmage, knowing that you're just a week away from the first game of the season.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I'm looking forward to it. I mean, everything led up to this week, across the whole summer. I mean, it's so exciting. It's a really exciting time.
I know you've been looking forward to it. I saw you during the spring at a softball game, and you were asking me which games I was looking forward to the most. And I mean, it feels like you've been sort of really looking forward. This is your senior season. Obviously, we'll talk about your college choice, that you've made that decision. I imagine having that in the background, focusing now as a senior, the deck has been cleared for trying to finish off your high school career in a big way, hasn't it?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, it's just, football's such a special time of the year, and it's just, you look forward to your senior year since you're a freshman and like, oh, I can't wait to be a senior. And, you know, year 1 goes by. I remember Jaden Durr, after my sophomore season, he goes, man, we're already halfway done with our whole season or our whole year. I'm like, yeah. And then you know, junior year comes by, and then it just, boom, senior year hits you, and it's here. It's here.
What has it meant to be part of what I would call a renaissance of Wausau West football? The last 2 years doing something that we haven't seen at West, you know, winning conference championships back-to-back years, where, you know, it was a process where a lot of coaches and players, and I think just generally the whole program, after a couple of down years, put it all together. We had to work in the weight room. We had to work in the off season. We had to work with the leadership groups, and it's all come together the last 2 years. What has it meant to you and your teammates who have been a big part of the last 2 years? I call it a renaissance of Warrior football.
Yeah, I mean, we start with a really good group of guys. I remember right when we started having our first conference championship of, a long time. But we had, the group of Joe Behrens and Colton Gearink. I mean, it was we just started doing some extra stuff in the off season that really paid off. And then last year we just kind of built on to that. And then all of a sudden everything grew, and here we are. So
how would you describe your progression during your high school football season, career, I should say, because obviously it's been, very much step by step. Yeah. I don't think it's been one of those where it's exploded on the scene, but it's been a gradual process. How would you describe your process? What have been the keys for your improvement and moving, up in terms of your team and within your conference, and even now in the state realm? What have been the keys in terms of that progress?
Oh man, I remember starting as a sophomore. I started on varsity. The first game, I remember getting rocked the first play, and I was like, Coach Nowinski goes, "Welcome to Friday Night Lights." So I'm like, "Yep, there it is." So, I mean, back then I was a boy going against men. And then, leveled the playing field a little bit last year. And now it's, it all starts in the weight room. It really does. I mean, I was at 205 my sophomore year. And then I gained 30 pounds for sophomore or junior year. And now I'm 250 right now. So, I mean, it starts in the weight room, get big, fast, strong. And it just works. The weight room, eating, keeping your speed, it just works. That's just what you're supposed to do.
What's been the sense during the off season, during the first couple of weeks of practice? It feels like there's an expectation now at West of excellence. When you guys are in the locker room, when you guys are in your leadership groups, when you guys are on the field, what are you hearing from your guys? What are the main, I don't know if you call them goals, but maybe even daily goals? Because it feels like you guys are almost going to the office every day now, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you just gotta. I think the coach has really set a standard this year where we expect to win now. I mean, the standard has been set, and now the whole team, we all trust the coaches, and we buy into the program, and we know what we got to do and how we got to do it, and we're ready to do it.
Again, we're talking to Wausau West senior Bryce Jaworski here on the Big High School Sports Show on Bull Falls Radio, 98.9 and 1230. Let's talk about your team. Again, coming off a terrific season last year, another share of the conference championship, a win in the first round of the playoffs, beating obviously a very good Wisconsin Rapids team, then running into the number one ranked team in the state at the time, Bayport. When you look at this version of the Warriors, besides yourself, we'll put you to the side right now. When you look at this team, because you've been around it now long enough, what would you say are the biggest strengths of this team?
The run game. I mean, the 26 power. I mean, as expected. But, our offensive line, we return, 3 guys, including me. But, our defense, our special teams guys, our DBs. I mean, it's just a really solid all-around group of guys. I mean, everyone seems locked in and bought into the program, and just everything. There's no real weakness that I can see.
But maybe no weakness, but is there any question marks? Is there anything that, hey, we got to level 2 last year? What do we need to do to get to that next level or make even a deeper run? Is there anything a question mark that, hey, this is something that we're going to have to do better in order to become even better? Yeah,
I mean, for sure, looking from the grand scheme of things, I mean, establishing a passing game is just obviously a must in the playoffs. I mean, it's really, really hard to run the ball a lot and be successful in the playoffs because as week by week teams see tendencies and stuff like that. So, I mean, I think if we establish a really nice passing game like we got going this year, I think we'll make a really deep run.
We'll talk more about this week and about football. Let's step away. You're sitting here proudly wearing a U.S. Army shirt, and one of the big announcements in the off season was that you decided you're going to go to the U.S. Military Academy at West Point. I can imagine that is it's almost, I'm sure your family is incredibly proud. what ultimately, because we hear the stories about the incredible responsibilities and how difficult it is for student athletes where, basically there's no favoritism. You just have to basically do everything and then add a little bit more.
Yep.
Ultimately, what was the reasons behind you saying, hey, West Point's the place for me?
Well, during my whole recruiting process, the one real major thing that stuck out is I want to go to practice every day. The brotherhood between players, it's just, it all just goes together. And, you can't really ask for more, like, a better brotherhood than the U.S. Military Academy. It's like you got guys who are going to die together at war, or not necessarily, but it just, in general, it's just, there's no better feeling that I've been around when I was there and watching the practices and how people communicated, how the coaches communicated. It was a really, really good feeling, and the mutual respect of them wanting me. And I was like, you know what, this is probably a good place to call home.
Do you have, goals or dreams for your service? Do you have an idea how the road ahead is going to be? Or any hopes that you have?
Recently, I've been really interested in starting coaching for, so what they have, a really cool thing there is there's a mandatory 5-year commitment after you play football and go to school. So it's a 10-year commitment because there's a prep school that I will be going to. And so after my football days are up, I'm just going to go back, and there's an option that I choose to go coach football for the prep school. So I'm really thinking about that route. Otherwise, going to they got some military bases in Texas and stuff like that, which I'm really interested in. So anything military, I'm interested. So yeah.
Could I ask you, because that's one of the interesting things, and I don't know if it's harder or what, because they still want to be very competitive on the football field. They're not just there to do it; they want to be, very good in terms of playing Division I college football and then trying to, beat Navy every year and all that stuff. How did you notice in terms of the recruiting process how maybe the Army coaches recruited differently than maybe the other coaches that you dealt with in terms of, because I imagine they have to do things a little differently.
Yeah, for sure.
What did you notice in terms of how they recruit?
Okay, so where to start? So they have an unlimited amount of scholarships they can hand out, because obviously they're going to limit it because they only have a certain amount of spots in the roster. But as for scholarships, everyone's on scholarship. So there's no preferred walk-ons. It's just people on scholarship. So they will hand out, I would say, they have to hand out entire new offers to an entire new team every single year for the prep school and a regular direct route. So you'll see 60 plus offers every single year from people around the country who will commit there and go there. So that is incredibly different from take Wisconsin, for example. They'll hand out, their class of 13, 14 kids. That's a pretty usual amount. So that is one of the biggest things. Other than that, it's pretty... They changed their entire offense this year, so that's going to be something that really helped the recruiting, because, they're going to get a real quarterback, not just a, wildcat quarterback, go up the hole, So, yeah, that really helped the recruiting after talking to, Coach Jeff Monken, their head coach. My recruiting coordinator, Matt Drinkle. But, their whole recruiting process has really changed since their grand announcement of changing the offense. So they're recruiting real skilled players, 3 stars, there's a 4-star. So, there's some really good stuff going there right now.
Again, we're talking to Bryce Jaworski of Wausau West High School here on the Big High School Sports Show on Bull Falls Radio. You talked about how much you've been putting on the muscle, and you're a big tight end. Is that your future, or will you be playing a different position? Because sometimes we do see kids at the high school level here around Central Wisconsin that go on to the next level, that sometimes they play a different position. Do you have an idea what the plans are when you get to Army?
Yeah, so I recently talked with Jeff Powers, Coach Powers at Army, and what he says is they really like me as what I'm doing right now. So, split back, I'll go in motion, blocking the ends and stuff like that, leading up the hole. So really fortunate to be doing exactly what I'm going to be doing there right now at Wausau West. So it's just good extra, practice for when I get there.
Let's talk about school at West. What's your favorite class?
I mean, I want to say physical education, but
say what? Go for it.
Yeah, well, that's it right there. That's right.
Truthfulness is always good, and because I mean, obviously, you know, heck, back when I was going to school, I loved Via too. So, let's go back to the football aspect. When you go back to the game against Bayport last year, what'd you find out? What'd you find out in that game? Because obviously Bayport was one of the best teams in the state. They didn't get all the way because they ran into that buzzsaw named Kimberly. Yeah. But what did you find out, you and your teammates, that you're going to take into the new season?
I mean, everything's winnable. I think. Everyone is a high school player. I mean, there's no some adult NFL guy on the roster or something like that. It's just everyone is a high school player, no matter how many stars they got, no matter what school they're going to. It's the mindset that you go into the game and compete with. That's everything. And I think learning from that, I think it's such a dynamic. I don't even know what to say. Like, you go into that game and it's like everyone expected Bayport to win, right? They got some really good players. They had a really good offense last year, and it hits you where we were up at one point. I'm like, whoa, we can do this. And then, things started slipping here and there. And it's just that feeling of everything's winnable that we can take back this year, especially when we get into the playoffs and stuff like that. So I think that knowing of we can win these types of games is it's a good feeling to have.
Who's your favorite team to play against?
Rapids.
Why?
Yeah. I don't know. I love a physical game, and sure enough, they're going to give it to you. So they got some really good players in their defense and stuff like that. So I mean, Rapids is always a really fun game. It's good climate and it's good. It's a good game. And
the law game is back this year.
That's right.
What does that mean to you?
We'll see when we get there, but I mean, I'm really looking forward to it. And it's obviously the last law game ever. So right. I mean, I'm expecting the stands to be packed and everything like that. So I mean, it'll be a fun game.
And finally, something we ask all of our student athlete guests at the end is, obviously you're coming to your senior year, and obviously, leadership and that's going to be part of what you do in the future as well. If you had a chance to run into a freshman as part of at Wausau West as part of the football program coming up right from the beginning, right at the beginning of their football career at the high school level, what piece of advice would you give?
Stick to your dreams for sure. I mean, my personal dream was to play Division I college football and earn a scholarship. So, and just bit by bit, you just, no matter what people say, no matter what people, think of you, it's you against yourself. And, I mean, it's just, you can do anything you stick your mind to. So, I mean, it just set a goal and go get it.
Bryce Jaworski, Wausau West Warriors Senior. Well, good luck against Superior on Friday. Good luck throughout the course of the season. Good luck at the U.S. Military Academy, and thank you for coming on by.
Yeah, no problem. Thank you.
We're going to take a quick break and come back. We'll be talking to, from WisSports.net, Bob Brainerd. He is going to be a play-by-play guy for a new series of Thursday night games. We'll talk high school football around the state of Wisconsin with Bob Brainerd coming up next. It is the Big High School Sports Show on Bull Falls Radio, 98.9 and 1230. And welcome back. It's our first edition of the Big High School Sports Show for the 2023-2024 school year on Bull Falls Radio, 98.9 and 1230. Online at bullfallsradio.com, mobile devices, and Alexa by searching WXCO. We'll continue discussing the Week 1 action around Central Wisconsin in just a few minutes. But if you're a high school football fan this year, more to love because Thursday nights, there's going to be an opportunity for a really big set of games. WisSports.net, of course, is one of the sources for Wisconsin high school sports. Get the information right there. And they are producing a new series of football live streams on Thursday nights featuring really good matchups. Teams all ranked in the preseason polls. And one of the broadcasters for the Thursday night games during the course of the season is Bob Brainerd. And Bob Brainerd been around Wisconsin sports at the professional levels, the collegiate levels, and so much with the high school levels. First of all, Bob, thank you for spending a few minutes with us tonight.
Oh, Chad, no problem. I mean, high school football week 1, it's always so exciting. It gets, the blood starts flowing. You start thinking about the next 9 weeks, and then the postseason levels 1, 2, 3, 4, and of course the state championships in Madison. So it's a great time of year. We, like you and me, we're both as excited as the guys who are strapping on the helmets these past couple of weeks and getting ready for week 1.
You are so right when it comes to that. Been counting down the days and the weeks since spring sports ended back in June. Before we actually talk about this series of games, again, a great series of games that you have with WisSports.net on their YouTube channel. I said it. You've been, you've done it all when it comes to broadcasting sports. You've been TV, radio, play-by-play, anchoring, pros, college, high schools. When it comes to high school athletics, what's unique? You've been around it. Again, big-time pros and colleges, Division I colleges. What makes high school sports, especially here in Wisconsin, something that you come back to?
Well, Chad, you know what it's like on Friday nights and how special Friday nights are in the state of Wisconsin. And that's what makes it special for me to broadcast and be a part of it. Because wherever you go, no matter the level, small schools, big schools, there's a juice in the air. There's a vibe on Friday nights, and rivalry games. Everything that these kids practice for and build up for. There's so many great stories of how these kids have evolved and what they turn into, young men, and what they do going forward. Be it collegiately, and then sometimes all the way to the National Football League. We've seen plenty of guys come out of the state of Wisconsin. But even besides that, just watching them rally, if their football career ends in high school, and maybe it ends with a state championship, and that's their last game of playing competitive football, what a great story that is. Then some kids go into the medical field or whatever field they do, but they end their high school football playing career at Camp Randall Stadium. I love stories like that, and I love everything that goes around with the atmosphere of high school football. So you know what it's like. I know what it's like. That's what keeps drawing me back to the prep scene on Friday night.
And you hit it so well. When it comes to football especially, when it's done, it's done. There's not really, you call them beer leagues or anything like that where you can play softball. You don't put on the pads. It's pretty much over for about 98% of them, and then a few lucky ones go to college, and then even a fewer lucky ones go on to the pros. One other thing, again, I'm looking at these games that you got, and one thing that I think makes it actually, I appreciate what you're going to have to do here over the next 8-9 weeks of the regular season is you see different teams each and every week. And I think I'm a little lucky because the teams I see them on a regular basis. I get to go to practice, learn a lot more about it. There's quite a challenge to be able to go and see these, again, really good programs. But, you come in, you see them, and then you move on to the next matchup. What are the challenges in terms of trying to give the broadcast that you do so often? I mean, such a great job. But the preparation for these games, I mean, it's a real challenge, isn't it?
Yeah, Chad, the buzzword, the keyword, you just said it, is preparation. And what we do, my partner, the Hall of Fame coach, Dan Brunner, who coached for so many years down at Hartford, and he's still part of the Wisconsin Football Coaches Association board. But what we do is this allows us a chance to kind of spread our tentacles and get out of our comfort zone and dive in to teams that are not in Southeast Wisconsin, where both Dan and I, live, and that's where we've done the bulk of our games over the years. But now, because on WisSports.net, what we're doing is we can go anywhere in the state, and we're going to venture out here in our first year of this venture. So our first game, week 1, is going to be in Bayport. The Pirates are going to take on Middleton. So the Cardinals are going to travel from outside of Madison all the way up to Bayport. This will be the third straight year that these teams have met in a really nice non-conference starter for both teams, kind of a litmus test. So, again, what that does is we need to dive in. What is Middleton football all about? What is Bayport football all about? We've got a general idea, but we need to go beyond the general ideas and find out what makes these teams tick for 2023. And I get excited about that because it broadens my scope, Dan as well, we get to kind of see a bunch of different teams out of our neck of the woods. And that, again, is going to be the beauty, is that with this streaming free broadcast that's going to take place on Thursday night, anybody anywhere in the state can watch it, which means we can go anywhere and broadcast any team.
Bayport's been so good. They ended Wausau West season. I was over there last year, and they've done that previously as well. It looks like the power that's in the Fox Valley, in the eastern part of the state. As you said, you know more in the south and southeast part of the state. In your preparations, when you're looking at high school football, where do you see the main strength, the areas that are bringing the best football right now in Wisconsin?
Well, you know, Chad, I mean, and you've seen this as well. It kind of seems to shift from year to year. And when I say shift, I only mean that I think more teams are getting into the conversation of the shift. You've got the obvious teams that we know, you know, the Kimberleys and the Bayport from that neck of the woods. Down around Wisconsin, of course, Arrowhead's going to be good. Franklin, Muskego, all these teams from the Classic 8. Kettle Moraine won a Division II state title a year ago in Wales, Wisconsin. So the Classic 8 is always bringing really terrific teams. But then there's a team like Madison, like Middleton from the Madison area. And when I did start doing my dive on them, they've got some returning talent, really good returning talent. So they can not only make some noise in the Big 8, but I think they can make some noise in the postseason if they stay healthy and if they keep their focus on the football field. So again, I mean, I could rattle off a bunch of teams, but I think that's the point, is that it's not just the heavy hitters that we're used to seeing year in and year out. We're going to be hearing a lot about those teams that I just mentioned, but I think other teams are starting to get more competitive and starting to get in these conversations for these conference championships and then to make deeper playoff runs once we get there in late October.
Again, we're talking to Bob Brainerd, who will be the play-by-play voice on the series of Thursday night throwdown games on the WisSports.net YouTube channel, starting with Middleton at Bayport in week number 1. I think, you've talked about, again, the number of teams that have the potential of jumping in. I wanted to ask you a big tent question, because obviously the last 4 or 5 years have been a lot of movement in terms of the issues involving with COVID, and then numbers issues at a number of other schools. And we're seeing teams that have had to cancel varsity seasons. We saw it here in Wausau with East, who's coming back this year. You see teams that move from 11-player to 8-player football. Generally, as you look at football in the state of Wisconsin, how healthy is it? Do you feel like all this movement has made us a little bit more healthy? If there's still question marks, what's your overall take about where high school football stands in Wisconsin?
Chad, I think it's still work in progress. You know, for so many years we heard about this seismic shift of, well, this is going to happen. We need to have conferences built by football coaches and teams kind of getting their heads together, and we need football only conferences. And, a lot of people didn't want to do that because they wanted to preserve rivalries. They wanted to, we can't mess with history. That can't happen. But I think the idea all along has been to say, let's start matching up teams that belong against one another, size-wise, competitiveness. I think the overall objective is so that we don't have lopsided teams playing against weaker teams, and therefore let's shift these teams around so that they are more competitive, so that you have a fighting chance on Friday or Thursday night, in our case. I think that's the overall thing that the goal has been here all along. So, again, I still think it's work in progress. I think we need to see how this goes when teams shift around. Okay, do we have balance now in the quote-unquote conference that was created? Is it more competitive? Do we have less of a bunch of really good teams at the top and then the bottom feeders at the bottom, and then that's the way it is year in and year out? If we can get it so that it is more competitive with all this shuffling that's going on, then I think mission accomplished. But again, I think we got to see how it plays out, and I don't think we're done. I don't think we're ever going to be done shuffling, because as long as you find somebody who says, yeah, this works, you're going to find somebody who says, yeah, but it's not working for us. And so it's always going to be about the team that when it's not working for them, they're going to look for something that makes them be in a more competitive conference.
I always try to ask somebody that has, I think, a statewide perspective about 8-player football, because a lot of folks really haven't seen it. I've been very lucky because here in Wausau we have the two-time defending state champion Newman Catholic, where this has been just such a perfect fit for them over the past handful of years. I was wondering, based on, you obviously, I think, have a focus a lot on the 11-player game. What do you hear from folks when it comes to 8-player football in the state of Wisconsin?
Well, Chad, I hear good things, and you're right. I don't get a chance to see 8-player football from where I live. We just don't have it in my backyard. But I can tell you this. Doing the Wisconsin Football Coaches Association All-Star Games every year, and they've added the 8-player, probably about, I think we're around like 4 or 5 years of having the 8-player have their All-Star game, also play at Titan Stadium in Oshkosh. It's been well-received. The guys now get their own night. They get Friday night. Then you have the large schools and the small schools playing on Saturday afternoon, the day after. So that's a shift to show you that there's more kids involved in 8-man, and they deserve to have an all-star game and a stage to their very own. But I also hear, especially when we get to the state finals in Madison, played at Camp Randall, and you don't have the 8-man games being played there, but we always have the conversations about this when we're having the Division 7 games, even the Division 6 games, and you start looking at the enrollments and going, gosh, are they close? I mean, Chad, you can look at the sidelines at Camp Randall. I mean, when there's not as many people in Camp Randall, and you look at the sidelines of the D7 and D6 games and go, holy cow, I mean, they probably have every kid in the school on this roster. And so that teams are thinking that if something happens where a class is down or there's some injuries and, I mean, we're just scraping by, then they have to consider 8-man football. And when I say you have to consider it, I think now there's more of they're leaning into it more now, Chet. I think they're not afraid to go to 8-man. I think they've looked at the smaller schools, have looked at these games, and they've looked at the 8-man games and said, this is pretty good. This is pretty competitive. It's still football, but when our numbers dwindle, rather than shut a program down completely, which we have seen, when teams just go, they wave the white flag. We can't do it because the numbers are down. I think they're starting to lean into 8-man and say, okay, the numbers are down, but if we go to 8-man, we can be competitive. We can still have a football team.
And I guess finally, as you get ready for week 1 of this new adventure on Thursday nights with WisSports.net, as you look, I see you have the first 8 games are all lined up. And I know this is an impossible question because you got so many really good teams and so many good matchups. Is there any one that, when you look at the list, that you say, man, I'm really looking forward to what this could be, what I think these teams could be, and in terms of what importance will be placed on a game that's on your schedule for the first 8 weeks before an open slot in week 9 to be announced?
Well, Travis Wilson would kill me if I said, one game over another. Because I got to tip my hat to Travis. He's the one who went out and asked the schools to move, if they weren't already on a Thursday night, and some of them are anyway early in the season, but to ask a school to move from the traditional Friday night to Thursday, that's a big deal. It's a big deal to a lot of people. And so hats off to Travis for going to the schools and saying, look, we want to feature you on this new venture, and then for having the schools agree to do it. I mean, so tremendous that we do get these great matchups. But I will, if I, hand to the fire, Chad, I'll pick one game, and I'm going to say Oak Creek and Franklin, which I think is maybe like middle of the season, maybe week 4, week 5, something like that. But anyway,
week 6, I got it right in front of me.
Week 6. Thank you very much for the refresher. These are two backyard neighbors who, I don't want to say they don't like each other, but because I think they respect each other. I mean, they are right now, the school districts are right next door, and every year they are teams, Oak Creek and Franklin, they're always involved in the Southeast Conference Championship. They just field football teams, and when they play again, they have a special trophy. It's a trophy where it's a football helmet on top, and half of it is Franklin and half of it is Oak Creek. So there's that. There's the bragging rights. A lot of those kids, they play against each other. They know each other just from the neighborhoods growing up. But this year especially, Franklin is always good. Franklin is always in the mix to win a state title. And I think Oak Creek has some talent. They have a 4-year starter at quarterback, Chad, which is really unusual in the game today. So you start there. They've got some good pieces in the backfield and on the defensive side. So I think Oak Creek is really going to be up for this football game. It could very well be the Southeast Conference Championship. And again, I think both teams, if they remain healthy and they project out to what a lot of people are thinking in the Southeast Conference, I think both teams can have a deep playoff run as well.
Fantastic. Boy, what an exciting time of the year. Week number 1 of high school football. I've been waiting all summer for this, and really excited to see what you and Dan Brunner and Wiz Sports does with this new package. It's really great to expand the amount of games that folks around the state of Wisconsin can see in terms of high school and be able to, I think, get a good feel for what's going on around high school football in the state of Wisconsin. So Thursday night, Middleton at Bayport for week 1. And again, Bob, really appreciate it. I know you're a busy guy and really have a lot of fun, and hopefully we can hook up again on the program later in the season.
Anytime, Chad. We're looking forward to week 1. Hey, it's free, so dial us up on Thursday night, and that'll get everybody ready for Friday night football.
Absolutely. Again, Bob Brainerd, play-by-play man for the Thursday Night Throwdown series that will air on the WisSports.net YouTube page, starting with Middleton at Bayport. We need to take a quick time out, and we're going to come back and talk more about some of the big matchups coming up in week 1 here in Central Wisconsin. It's the Big High School Sports Show on Bull Falls Radio, 98.9 and 1230, online at bullfallsradio.com, mobile devices and Alexa by searching WXCO, and on the Civic Media app. It's the Big High School Sports Show on Bull Falls Radio, 98.9 and 1230, online at bullfallsradio.com, mobile devices and Alexa by searching WXCO, and on the Civic Media app. I'm Chad Holmes. Again, here in week 1, flying solo, but starting next week, I'll be joined by former Wausau West head football coach Jason Foster as my co-host for the football portion of the season. And then once we get to around Thanksgiving in that general area and the start of winter sports, we'll be joined by Jeff Gress, the former Newman Catholic boys basketball coach. So starting here on August the 16th, we'll continue into mid-March every Wednesday from 6 until 8 p.m., the Big High School Sports Show on Bull Falls Radio, 98.9 and 1230. Well, looking at the Central Wisconsin Conference, both the CWC Large and the CWC Small, as you look at the Large, you got some real powerhouses at the top. You got Stratford, of course, defending state champs. Wittenberg-Burnhamwood, a team that has been getting better and better in recent years. Amherst, some controversy at the end of last season for the Amherst Falcons, but it's still been a program that has been at or near the top of this league for a number of years. And then there was Shiocton a year ago, who made the Cinderella run all the way to the finals of the Division 7 state finals. So made it all the way to Camp Randall with Shiocton. So again, the CWC Large, outstanding schools, and it should be another very interesting season in that league. Looking at the matchups, we talked a bit earlier about the fantastic non-conference game in Mosinee on Friday when the Stratford Tigers travel to Mosinee to take on the Indians. Again, Kohler Kilty back after his incredible season, leading Stratford to that state title. Anybody against Stratford this season will have to keep a close eye on Kohler Kilty, who ran for nearly 1,900 yards and 21 TDs a year ago. Talked earlier as well about the Wittenberg-Burnhamwood home matchup against Antigo from the GNC. Wittenberg-Burnhamwood, again, looking to continue to build. It's been a consistent build the last few years. Unfortunately, again, an early exit in the postseason a year ago for the Chargers. But, again, a lot of talent back, and it looks like they will be right up there with Stratford in the conference. You got Amherst, again, looking to return to where they are used to being. Amherst, again, boy, a year ago, Amherst started the year off a couple of non-conference losses, but then rebounded. They were in position for another CWC large title. They won 6 straight games to set up a winner-take-all game at Stratford for the title. However, in that week, in the run-up to the Stratford game, it was determined Amherst had used an ineligible player and would have to forfeit all their wins. So what they did is they knocked off Stratford in that game, but with all those forfeits, they were not eligible for the playoffs. So again, a year where they were 7-2 on the field, undefeated in conference, but no playoffs for Amherst. It's been a program that's just been so consistent over the years, and they'll try to start another run with a non-conference game against Clintonville. Clintonville last season did knock off Amherst in non-conference play. Also, Shiocton, the Shiocton Chiefs, as I said, quite the, you called it a fairy tale run for Shiocton, and they will take on Iola Scandinavia from the CWC Small. You had Shiocton make the playoffs, and then just kept on winning. Wins in level 1, level 2, level 3, level 4, and made it all the way to the state final at Camp Randall before falling to powerful Regis. Unfortunately for Shiocton, it'll be a big rebuild in 2023 as quarterback Dawson Schmidt, top rusher Kate Stingle, and top receiver Dylan Herb have all graduated, but they do have wide receiver Bennett Schmidt back after a terrific 2022 with 45 catches for 894 yards and 7 touchdowns. Iola Scandinavia, meantime, they had some really outstanding teams in the recent past, but last season started 0-5 before a late rally left them just short of the playoffs with a 3-6 overall mark and 3-4 in the league. As I'll talk about a little bit more, those crossover games with Marywood schools really cost Iola. They were 3-2 in the CWC Small, but 2 of their quote league end quote losses were crossovers with Marywood schools. Running back Ryan Campart, who gained 526 yards and scored 7 TDs, is back for the T-Birds, but it won't be an easy opener at their old CWC large foe, Shiocton. Other teams in the CWC large that will be looking to, I think, surprise this year. You got, I think, the teams expected to be in the bottom half of the league, especially according to the WisSports.net preseason preview that they put out each year. Such great information at WisSports.net. But yeah, Wyowega Fremont, Manawa, Nakusa, and Spencer Columbus. Spencer Columbus had some really good teams, but right now they're in a rebuilding stage. Spencer Columbus struggled with an 0-9 record a year ago. They will open up this week against St. Croix Central. So, again, they made it all the way to the state finals back in 2015. And, again, they're trying to turn things around. You got Nakusa. They will be opening up against Ripon at home on Friday. They just had 1 win on the field last year. Got Manawa. Manawa was fortunate to make the playoffs last year. They got an extra win because they lost to Amherst, but then Amherst was forced to forfeit it, and that gave Manawa a 3-4 conference record, and they were able to get into the playoffs, but they lost to Coleman 62-0. Manawa does have to replace their quarterback, Tanner Nienhaus. They do have their top receiver back, Nathan Gorman. And also Wyowega Fremont. Wyowega Fremont is a team that has been improving. Last season, they started 4-0. But they were still able to make the playoffs, fell to St. Mary Springs in level 1, but still, it was the best season Wyowega Fremont has had in a number of seasons. So it'll be interesting to see if they are able to continue their upward climb. They will host Bellevue coming up on Friday night. Looking at the CWC Small, it was basically a one-team race in that conference. Assumption was the conference champions a year ago. They won the league by 3 games. Only 2 of the schools in the CWC Small made the postseason playoffs. And as I've said, it's really tough on these schools, this setup, because both the CWC Small and the Marywood Conference have too few teams. They've had some issues with teams ending their varsity football programs and going either to JV-only schedules or to 8-player. So what they've decided to do the last couple of years, last year and this year, is for the CWC Small and the Marywood Conference to have 2 crossover games that count in the conference standings. And as I said, for Iola Scandinavia, in their true league, they were 3-2. But with those 2 losses, that put them at 3-4 and outside the playoffs. So, again, these are tough games, especially if you draw teams like Edgar and Colby and Auburndale that have been so good last season, expected to be good this year. for the CWC small schools, if you're able to win one of the two, you're probably in a pretty good spot. But Assumption, again, won the league title a year ago. It's a mixed bag in terms of returnees for the Royals. They do have 5 starters back on both sides of the ball, but looking to replace some big offensive production with the graduations of 1,300-yard rusher Nick Lieberg, along with running back Kate Stotts and all-league quarterback Jack Klatt. The Royals in Week 1 will face Necedah. Necedah struggling. They come off a winless campaign in 2022, have a new head coach and many unknowns. Also, among the teams involved, we talked earlier about the Loyal game at Abbotsford. You talked a little bit just a few moments ago by Iola Scandinavia against Shiocton. Rosholt Hornets will open up against St. Mary Catholic. It was a very tough learning season for a young Rosholt squad in 2022. No wins on the field, no tight games. The good news is that Rosholt does have many of those young players back, but they'll need to make some major strides to work their way back into contention for a playoff spot. The Hornets' Week 1 opponent is an interesting story. St. Mary Catholic returns to 11-player football after some big success in the 8-player game. They were unbeaten the last 2 seasons, but playoff ineligible because of enrollments beyond 200. It'll be very interesting to see how St. Mary Catholic does in 11-player football after their great seasons in 8-player the last 2 years. And then there is a CWC small team in action on Saturday, the Pacelli Cardinals. Pacelli did a fantastic job of making the playoffs a year ago. The only other CWC small school team other than Assumption to make the postseason, the Pacelli Cardinals opened 0-4, but won 4 of their last 5, including a 16-13 win at Iola Scandinavia in Week 8 of the season that put the Cardinals in the playoffs and ultimately left the T-Birds out. Pacelli does have some big shoes to fill. Two-way standout Brock Bierenkott has graduated. Bierenkott ran for 1,416 yards and 16 touchdowns, plus added 116 tackles on defense in 2022. Replacing that kind of production won't be easy, but head coach Drew Nelson told WisSports.net he expects to be solid up front on both sides of the ball. Pacelli on Saturday afternoon at Gerke Field will host Burlington Catholic Central. Really a good non-conference matchup for Pacelli. Catholic Central was 7-3 a year ago, finished in 3rd place in the Midwest Classic Conference, but they do enter this season needing to replace their quarterback, top rusher, and top receiver. But still a very good, tough non-conference matchup for Pacelli. If you're looking for some high school football action, you can head down to Gerke Field Saturday afternoon for that one. Well, that's it in terms of looking at the conferences that we keep a close eye on. We're going to, again, focus a lot on the Valley Football Association, the Great Northern Conference, the Merriwood Conference, the CWC Large, and the CWC Small this year. And, again, every week we will have student-athlete guests, we'll have coach guests, and from time to time we'll have other special guests as well. Thanks to our guest this week. Again, really terrific to get off to a great start with 3 different guest here this week. We started off with the head coach of the Wausau East Lumberjacks, Tyler Kramer, Wausau West senior Bryce Jaworski, and WisSports.net play-by-play announcer Bob Brainerd. Again, next week, back at it, 6 till 8 p.m. Wednesday night. I'll be joined by Jason Foster, the former Wausau West coach. So we'll look forward to having Coach Foster on joining me starting next week. Make sure you join me on Friday night, Wausau West at Superior in the season opener, 6:35 for the pregame, and 7 o'clock for the opening kickoff right here on Bull Falls Radio, 98.9 and 1230, online at bullfallsradio.com, mobile devices, and Alexa by searching WXCO. This has been the Big High School Sports Show on Bull Falls Radio, 98.9 and 1230.